The State in Catholic Thought, A Treatise in Political Philosophy, by Heinrich Rommen. Chapter 4, The Organic View of the State. 1. The Basic Aspects of Community in Social Philosophy. Ever since man has endeavored to grasp the essence and the being of the enduring forms of social life, especially of the highest and most comprehensive one, the state, there have been two fundamental ways of perceiving, of understanding, and of comprehending these social forms. One is the mechanistic, individualist; the other, the organic, solidarist. These terms themselves are modern. The ways of comprehension which they designate are as old as brooding speculation on the essence and nature of human social forms. For a distinct grasp of these two fundamental views, we need only to let pass before our eyes the colorful succession of systems of political philosophy, systems of social philosophy, and systems of natural law that are in themselves systems of social philosophy. For they are general views not only of forms of social existence, but of life and of living being itself. It can be shown that an organic view of the state is the consequence of an organic teleological metaphysics, as a mechanistic view is the consequence of either a mechanistic metaphysics or of the denial of all metaphysics. So far as we may call the metaphysics of the Philosophia Perennis an organic teleological one, to that extent the conception of the state by this political philosophy is likewise organic, teleological. 2. The mechanist individualist view. Whenever the contemplative mind approached the problem of man's community forms, especially the so-called natural ones, such as the family and the state, the functional social group for continuous community, it had 2 points to start from, the individual and the group. In starting from the individual, it may begin with the idea of the individual as a fully self-sufficient, perfect being, autonomous in itself, a being for which sociality is only accidental, an external relation, useful but not essential for its internal perfection and a higher form of good life. If that is the starting point, there is no specific category of social being. Social being is only a sign or a symbol, without anything real behind it, and it is futile to speak of the reality of the state, of the common good, as something qualitatively different from the quantitative sum of the particular goods of the individuals forming the body politic. Then the state has no objective end. Then, too, all these words do not mean something real, but are only symbols used economically, signifying simply the individuals as a sum, as a quantitative aggregation. Then all so-called social being, ens sociale, has no value as such, but is a simplified expression for the material utility which the individuals derive from the social form. And so all these social forms and institutions are produced by the arbitrary will of the individuals without any internal necessity. These forms, then, in their being and content, are absolutely at the mercy of these individuals whom no objective teleology controls. What unites the individuals is not an objective end, but the utility of the form as a mere sum of the fractional advantage, quantitatively equal for each of them. The individuals, of course, cooperate, but the motive is exclusively their self-interest, their profits. Each seeks first himself and his own advantage. The others become a mere means for that self-centered purpose. The individual does not devote himself to the community interest, the common good. His personality plays no part in his relation to the community. He invests in society only his carefully calculated interests, and preserves for himself, so to speak, the right to rescind what he regards as always purely contractual relations controlled by self-interest. The rationality of calculable legal forms, the rationally expected behavior of the other individuals as agreed upon by contracts, constitute the typical element. The unselfish social virtues aiming at the common good as a higher form of life and love, as an ennobling unselfish search for higher objective values, are all foreign to this attitude. The powers of love, of devotion, and of altruistic sacrifice for the common good become sentimental unrealities. Consequently, the discussion within such a pattern swings about the rights of the individual, because these rights grant the free functioning of self-interest. Duties to the community, the social balance of rights, are less perceived, and when perceived are again subordinated to self-interest as a fair price for rights. From this point of view, the idea of objective duties independent of any paying return to the person, that is, as a categorical imperative is inconceivable. There exists only one duty to observe the freely enacted contracts. Other duties are not considered necessary because the rights of the one contracting party are balanced by the equal rights of the other. The self-interest of the one is controlled by the right of the other to effect his self-interest. Of course, the philosophers of this individualism teach that, in spite of the fact that self-interest and profit are the motives of social relations, a peaceful pattern of social life can still be reached. Because of the pre-stabilized pattern of the laws of nature, social harmony automatically arises out of the pursuit of self-interest by each, checked only by the right of others to pursue their self-interest. As previously noted, the point from which all this individualistic thinking starts is the intrinsically self-sufficient, perfect, autonomous individuals, who, controlled only by their self-interests, freely form a network of relations represented by revocable contractual forms. This they do so only for their own advantage and at their own risk, sociological monads that they are. It is significant that this philosophy draws its figures of exemplification from the world of mechanics, and that its appropriate natural theology is deism. This takes a mechanical view of the universe as a watch, and the creator as a rather disinterested watchmaker. 3. Mechanist individualist view applied to the state. If these concepts are applied to the body politic, it follows that the state originates not in the social nature of man, not in the will for a fuller and more perfect realization of man's nature, but in a free contract of autonomous, self-sufficient individuals with the sole motive of a more successful pursuit of self-interest. The end of the state is this self-interest and nothing else. It is not objective and transcendent to the individuals. The state is not intrinsically a higher form of human life. It is only the protector of the contractual relations of the individuals. If the expression common good is still used, it is used only as a conventional symbol. It is a concept that has no basis in reality, but is a purely nominalist flatus vocis. The compulsory power of political authority, authority in the strictest sense, demanding obedience, is explained exclusively as the sum of transfers and concessions of rights by the individuals and revocable by them at any time and at their subjective pleasure. Authority, therefore, has no proper objective power arising out of the objective end of the body politic, which itself issues from man's social nature. Consequently, the relations between subject and authority are ruled by commutative justice. As in private law, the contract form is the basis of these relations. Hence, the fundamental principle of the legal bond between individual and state authority is that of equality and private utility. Footnote. It should be remarked that there are, of course, such relations between individual and state authority. The Bill of Rights is intrinsically subject to the rules of commutative justice. Thus, in the modern state, the citizen can sue the government in the courts, and the state appears as if it were an equal. But the presupposition in such suits is always that the state does not appear here as the protector of the common good, but as a partner in a private contract. The state has stepped down into the sphere of the private law, and is to that degree subject to the ordo of the private law. Likewise, the general tendency as it has developed in marriage and family law is to subject the relations between individuals and the state to the typical forms of the private law and of commutative justice of an individualist society, that is, to a strongly contractual subjective interpretation of law without much understanding of the objective status. A consideration of marriage law will throw light on this tendency. Matrimony is undoubtedly initiated by a contract, but the performance of this contract results in the fact that the partners enter into a new objective status wherein not the subjective will, agreements, and interpretations of the partners prevail, but the end of man in his social nature and the interest of society and the children, or at least these should prevail. It is modern individualistic thinking and subjectivism that, by forgetting the status character of matrimony, has overstressed the subjective interests of the contracting partners and facilitated divorce as if matrimony were in its whole content absolutely at the mercy of the contracting partners. No wonder that marriage and the family are considered not as an objective form of man's social life essentially independent of the changing subjective pleasures and whims of the members, but as an easily soluble contractual relation serving exclusively the subjective interests and caprices of the partners, therefore to be dissolved as soon as sacrifices are demanded in the interest of something greater than that of the individual. This kind of individualistic utilitarian thinking manifests itself, too, in regard to the relation between citizen and state. And this thinking is also responsible for modern attempts to do away with the concepts of a distinctive public law, of legal justice, and of distributive justice. It treats problems of eminent social and political importance as if there were at stake only interests of A and B, unconnected with the common good. It has no understanding of the sovereign intervention of the state in the form of social legislation for the sake of the common good and of distributive justice, because it consistently sees only individual interests, and these are to be left to the free, unhindered contracts of the partners in the labor contract. To read Ricardo's chapter on wages is to see at once that his reasoning is strongly controlled by the mechanistic philosophy of deism, and consequently has no room for the intervention of the state in behalf of social justice. The ultimate form of this thinking is the normativism of Kelsen and his school, which regards the state as exclusively a system of norms. Norms, furthermore, ruled by the conceptions of commutative justice. What remains is then a system of norms without authority, and a legal order without justice, because any objective measure of the positive norms is lacking, and the whole profound problem of the just law disappears before the problem of the mechanism of norm production. Democracy, which we consider the highest form of political status, becomes the political form of philosophical relativism. It is the market of a free competitive economy and its rules that set the pattern for this thinking in social philosophy. For such thinkers, the sole and sufficient motive of social life and organization is found in the self-interests of individuals. These self-interests, under the conditions of liberty of contract and property and of formal legal equality, automatically produce an optimal social harmony that results from the free forces of the individuals. With this belief is connected, at least by the optimists, the conviction that progress in economics and technique will so promote human perfection that eventually the specific political element, the state with its sovereign authority and compulsory power, will wither away in an economic world society. This society is, as it were, a civitas maxima, though it is anything but a civitas in the traditional sense. Rather, it looks like the machine that the deists in their mechanistic theology conceived the world to be. Thus, the specific political life, the authority that decides sovereignty and intervenes by appeal to the common good and to social justice, is regarded as something strange and inferior in relation to the automatism of socio-economic life ruled by self-interests and free competition everywhere. It is but a stage of social development that will be outmoded by continuous enlightenment. Then there will be needed no positive order, no authority, no compulsory power, interfering irrationally in the smoothly running apparatus of society. This dream of bourgeois individualistic optimism, this chiliastic belief in an unlimited progress, is but one of many similar fancies that have been dreamed by men since the sophists in Greece dreamed of a stateless paradise on earth. It is striking that this mechanistic view of the state takes its parables and examples from the realm of technical science or individualistic economics. The state is a mechanical apparatus or a mutual insurance corporation. The taxes are insurance premiums, the state and its government a kind of property owners' protective association. 4. Totalitarian collectivism. One should not think that the mechanistic view of the state sketched above is the only one. True, it rests on the fact that in the antithesis of individual and state, the process of thinking starts from and cares only for the individual as such, already internally perfect and morally self-sufficient. But if the process starts from the other pole, the state, and concentrates round it, the resulting totalitarian collectivism is an equally perfect expression of mechanistic thinking in social philosophy. Collectivism, in its antithesis, individual state, makes the state all. The individual becomes a qualityless element, a mere numerical concept, empty of any value. All other social forms through which and in which man lives, such as the family, the vocational group, and the religious community, and the rights of man to them and in them, become empty words. There must not be any other loyalty than that to the state. The individuals are nothing, the state is all. They are, therefore, beings without rights, unrestrictedly subject to an omnipotent state, which holds even the idea of God an unfair competitor, and which, therefore, either atheistically denies God or pantheistically identifies itself with God. The individuals are mere tools and are kept by propaganda in the condition of masses without independent minds and free wills. They are simply matter for the supreme power. As atoms, these massed individuals are moved, united, separated, and again united into new social combinations by ordinances and commands. They do not plan their own lives. These are planned by an irresistible, unlimited, and therefore irresponsible power. Concretely, they are planned by men with megalomaniac dreams and limitless lust for power. These men strive for a realization of perpetual human dreams by inhuman means, however much they conceal this lust for power in such propaganda terms of justification as the incarnation of the race, the froth on the top of the wave of the future, the tool of the dictatorship of the proletariat. The higher sounding the phrases, the more worthless is the individual person. The concept of politics has been changed from that of the leadership by wise men to a more perfect life into that of control by the skill of the social engineer, and by the cleverness of the experimenter in propaganda who uses lies, fear, bribes, and betrayal to extinguish the reason and will of the individuals molded into the rigid forms of mass organization. The idea of the people, the nation, as a coordinated living unity in the ordo of political existence, as a teleological universe of diverse social forms for free persons, where each person and each social form has its own function and independent rights in the order of the whole, where everybody finds his own perfection and happiness in the free service to the whole, this idea vanishes and is replaced by the idea of the impersonal mass, without will, without critical reason, the object of infinitely changing organization in accordance with the changing demands of a non-moral, anarchic, frigid reason of state. Mass is lack of individuality and personality, lack of all stable organization of forms and groups originating freely in the social process. It is atomistic uniformity of always interchangeable individuals, mere matter without souls and rights, tools of the social and political engineers. 5. Mechanist philosophy as the basis of the mechanist view. At the root of this view of social forms lies a mechanistic philosophy. It is the belief that a scientific causal method, with its presupposed atomism, its necessary limitation to the quantitative measurable element, is the only admissible means of interpretation of the phenomena of the world and of life, of the biological, vegetative, and sensitive life, as well as of the intellectual and moral life of man, and of the forms of his social life. Man himself is regarded as if he were something like a machine. The psychology of this philosophy is likewise mechanistic. The principles that Newton's atomistic natural philosophy used appropriately to explain physics are applied to the psychophysical apparatus. There is a striking affinity between the Ricardian pattern of the Homo economicus with the laws under which the mechanism of the market works, and the psychology of David Hume, for whom the soul is a bundle of associations, a diverse pattern of reactions to stimuli from the external world, which later captured the attention of mechanistic thinking under the name of milieu. Thus, the psychic life is an intricate apparatus, moved according to the principles of scientific causal epistemology. Consequently, that only which can be comprehended as experimentally provable, cause-effect relation, or as measurable by number and weight by the calculating intellect, that only exists as a true object of scientific perception. The application of this principle to the social life produces an atomistic social philosophy which, with emphasis on the social form, leads to Hobbes's Leviathan, or modern totalitarianism. With emphasis on the individual, it leads to individualistic theories, ranging from Bakunin's anarchism to the liberalist individualism of the Rousseau-Ricardo type. This way of thinking has no place for a genuine perception of the life of the soul, of love and hatred, of sympathy and charity. This world of innermost social life, the world of virtues and vices, the world of the heart, is beyond sciences. Therefore, to thinkers of this school it is inferior. It is unscientific, just as the religious world, imaginary and unreal as it is held, is unscientific and is to be overcome by sciences. It is truly striking that after the spread of rationalism, no true philosophy of love appeared until late in the 19th century, when the tide against rationalist philosophy began to turn. 6. The biological misinterpretation of the organic view. The direct opposite of that atomistic social philosophy is the so-called biological one. This has become popular since Herbert Spencer, applying the evolutionary theories of Darwin and Lamarck to social and political philosophy, with astounding industry and somewhat incautious enthusiasm, drew analogies between the biological organism and the social organism. Romanticism had already used these analogies to interpret the state as being created by the irrational powers, the subconscious historical process. But it did so in its bitter polemic against the political philosophy of rationalism and against the mechanistic interpretation of economic life by Ricardo and the other classical economists. The Romantics, therefore, were still aware that the life of the mind is neither rationalistic nor biological. But the new theories of biological evolution, as distinguished from reverently contemplated historical life, were applied in an irresistible, hasty ardor of analogy to social and political philosophy. According to their theories, the states are regarded as natural biological organisms, true hypostases. Political history is a natural process, a prolongation of natural history, as Gomplowicz tried to show. Of course, natural means here the opposite of mind, of free will directed by reason. It means the impersonal organic life of animals and plants. The theology of this school, if it has one, will be an impersonal pantheism or monism. Though it may seem as if this biological theory in political philosophy is infinitely removed from the mechanistic theory described above, they are more akin than appears at first sight. For in the last resort, the biological theory also rests on a similar concept of nature and on a similar method, the causal quantitative one of the natural sciences. Thus, for instance, Darwin's principle of selection by the struggle for existence, the milieu theory, is in the last analysis likewise mechanistic. As utilitarian, therefore measurable, motives are the basis of ethics in the other theory, so here usefulness or harmfulness to the hypostasized social organism is the basis of an ethics in which the traditional terms good or bad become merely a sign, an irrational reflex of the basically useful or harmful. So the new theory rests on the same mechanistic concept of social life as did the individualistic. The latter, however, was rationalistic, whereas the biological theory is bitterly anti-rationalistic. Its concepts of nature and the natural exclude the intellectual moral world, making it merely a reflex of the biological one. The individualistic theory at least acknowledges the world of the mind, though it narrows it down to a rationalistic one, a mere instrumental means to be employed by the individual for his self-interest and utility. For the biological school, the ethical imperatives are only signs of behaviors useful or harmful to the impersonal life of the social organism. This seems to be the place for a remark about the often misunderstood attacks of Pius IX and Leo XIII upon individualist liberalism, Manchesterism, etc. It shows an excellent sensitiveness in these popes and in many Catholic writers that they were so seldom carried away by the 19th century enthusiasm for natural sciences and the philosophy of individualist liberalism. They felt more than their contemporaries the noxiousness of the partly hidden principles on which the new civilization rested. They also saw with a clear eye that Marxism and the other forms of collectivism could be built upon the same principles as liberalist economics and could use the same methods to produce disastrous results for our Christian civilization. After the high-water mark of the biological theory was reached, modern political philosophy, resigning itself to an ascetic research and accumulation of facts, ruled out all philosophy and gave itself over to positivism. Any mention of the organic view of the state or an attempt at a transcendental teleological interpretation was considered unscientific, as beyond our experience and empirical methods. This empirical or positivist method, in a rather fruitless modesty, restricted itself to a mere mechanical collection and arbitrary classification of sociological and scientific facts. It despised the theoria of the old metaphysics and rejected any kind of intrinsic and transcendental teleology.